Coming straight out of Canton, 24/7, 365. From the Hall of Fame city, this is Uncensored Football. Yo, welcome back to another episode of Uncensored Football. I'm your host, Zach Zander, with my co-host, the fantasy big shot, EJ Savavik. What's going on, EJ?
What's up, Z?
Man, we took a little break, 2-week break, and we're back at it. We're less than 3 weeks away from the NFL season, and we have a special guest, the best-selling author of the Fantasy Black Book, Joe Pisapia. What is going on, Joe?
What's going on, fellas? Good to be back again. Love talking football with y'all. So, we're in the thick of it. We're only a couple weeks away now, if you can believe it. It doesn't feel real because we haven't had any preseason games, but I can assure you we are getting very close to NFL right now.
Absolutely, and I cannot wait. It's so weird, no preseason, and the training camp is like kind of less access than normal. So, Joe Pisapia, in your esteemed knowledge, do you think are we going to play football?
Yes.
Are we going to play a full season this year? Tell the fans, tell everybody at Uncensored Football, we're playing football in an entire season, correct?
If they have to play football on the moon, they're going to play football. I mean, you can see already Major League Baseball's had its hiccups. But, yeah, I mean, if Major League Baseball can do it with the amount of games and the travel schedule they have, football once a week is very manageable. And, look, there's going to be tests. There's going to be positive tests. There's going to be people who miss games. I think we have to understand that if you're not in a bubble, it is probably going to happen. But I think you also have to understand that the NFL is, when you watch Hard Knocks, you see the preparations they're making. You see how much money, time, and effort they're putting into the testing of everybody. And that's important because this is a game that, it's a full contact sport, right? Everyone's on top of each other all the time. So it's very important that they go in there healthy to the best of everyone's knowledge. And look, whether or not you have fans, I think is inconsequential. We need to have football, and I think we will. It's just too big of a business in this country. And it looks like they're doing everything the right way so far. And there will be some knuckleheads out there that do some wrong things, just like there were in Major League Baseball. And the difference is the NFL mindset is slightly different than MLB, which I also cover, because Major League Baseball is guaranteed money. These guys are getting paid regardless. When guys in the NFL, they get cut or things of that nature, you mess with a guy's money in the NFL, that's a whole other locker room issue, and it's a very different locker room to police than a Major League Baseball locker room. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, positive tests are inevitable at some point, but I do think we're going to have a season.
Me and EJ have been talking, and it's like Roger Goodell, like they didn't stop free agency. They didn't stop the draft. Nope. EJ, I mean, are you excited as Joe is, and are you so sure that we're going to have a season? Because it hasn't stopped anything except maybe some OTAs. Roger Goodell's had this thing rolling like a train, and we're going towards Kansas City and the Texans. Are you ready, EJ? Are you as confident as Joe is?
Absolutely, man. I mean, I was really bummed we didn't have that Hall of Fame game right down the street. I haven't missed one my whole life. So, obviously, that was heartbreaking. But like you said, man, the draft wasn't canceled and everybody else thought it should be. Roger Goodell is going to have them playing football. I cannot wait to have football back. And there's nothing better than Sundays during the NFL season.
Less than 3 weeks away. So, let's get to it. Joe, I'm going to hit you first. Is there a special draft strategy you're going into 2020 that maybe you weren't last year? I don't know. Are you fading rookies more than maybe previous years, or maybe you go get a tight end early? Is there something that sticks out that people need to do in 2020 that's possibly new or that you didn't do last year?
Well, look, the Black Book is all about one thing. It's about tailoring strategies for specific formats and league depths. And I think when you do that, that's where you have ultimate success. So if you're just in, your regular old PPR league, then I think that you have a certain mindset for that. Same thing of the Superflex league when you have a second quarterback. And you have to be adjusting to all those things. But generally speaking, I am someone, regardless, that wants to hit the running back position early and often. I look at the running backs as saying, well, there's a third of the league of running backs that I like a lot, and there's a third that I can stomach, and there's a third that I don't want on my roster at all. And I think that's pretty much where I'm personally at. So to hit that early and often, I think is very important. You want to get your targets and carries. You want to get all those things locked in, your touchdown equity, because that you can control to a certain extent. And for the most part, I am somebody who does go running back early and heavy, and usually back-to-back if I can. On occasion, I will, make the adjustment for a Julio Jones if he should slip into the second round or something like that, because that's a talent that I think people don't understand just how good he is. But again, you have to understand what kind of player you are too. And depending on your depth of the pool and do you know enough about, certain younger running backs and do you have the patience to wait for some of them to pop like Cam Akers and like Swift and Taylor and some of those guys. And I think it is difficult this year with the rookie class because you don't get to see them on the field. So it is going to possibly be a slower process than some other people might have hoped for. But I kind of like akin to Miles Sanders last year, some of these guys who are rookies might be better off as trade targets than as draft targets. Miles Sanders, Devin Singletary, these are all guys that were better in the second half of the season than the first half. And I think the same can probably be said for most of the rookies in this season as well, with the exception of probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's just in a really good spot right out of the gate there. But even so, like I still have a hard time taking him over Derrick Henry or Mixon or those top running backs right now, me personally. I know other people will put him above. I still have him as that next grouping right after those guys.
I love it. Now, EJ, Joe brought up Superflex. What is going to be your strategy going in the Superflex, especially with the quarterback position? Are you going to nail it really early and hard? Are you going to fade it and try to maybe go after your Jared Goffs and possibly your Daniel Jones?
It all depends on draft position, Z. Obviously, anything you do, you want to master it. Drafting is an art, man. And honestly, you got to put the time in. You got to have those mocks in. I mean, it depends on where I'm at. Now, where you want to be in a super flex league, in a 12-man league, is you want to be in the top 4 or you want to be in the bottom 4. Right in the middle, I don't like it, but it changes your whole strategy. If I'm in the top 4, my fingers are crossed for Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. If I'm in the bottom 4, I'm going running back, wide receiver, and I'm going to go up until round 7, and then that's when I'm going to go quarterback.
You make a great point right there. In Superflex, Lamar Jackson is going to be a darling. Pat Mahomes is going to be a darling with one of those first picks, but you're going to lose out on that running back depth. My last Superflex draft I did, Clyde Edwards-Helaire went 12, and then the dude went around and took Joe Mixon with the first pick of the second round. That is hard to laugh at right there. You walk away with 2 RB1s, and you can go back in the 3rd and 4th round and maybe get the Matt Ryans, the Jared Goffs, the Daniel Jones. Am I wrong here, Joe? Is that how you attack maybe the end of the first round? If you pull that number 12 position, that is, some people hate. I actually like it. I love going 12 and then having the first pick in the second round.
Yeah, I like being at the turns because you can control a little bit what you have. In the middle is always difficult because you're basically then at the whim of all the runs on either side, and I tend not to like that. I'd rather be towards one of the ends of the draft. But, in terms of taking a quarterback early in a single quarterback league, if you're going to do that, you just have to understand what kind of drafter you are. You have to know what's your knowledge of the pool. Do you know the guys that you think can, go from wide receiver 2 to 1 and 3 to 2? And same thing in running backs. Do you know some guys late in PPR that you can make work? And then in Superflex, obviously, all of that changes. In our Flex League draft a couple weeks ago in the Superflex, I think I was at 10. I took Mixon, and then on the way back, I was able to get Dak. And then on the way back, I had Fournette, Matt Ryan, and then Kareem Hunt. So those are the first 5 picks there. So I made sure I went running back heavy, and then I got my 2 big-time quarterbacks that I wanted, Dak and Matt Ryan, 2 guys that I think are in the top 5 in terms of quarterback conversation and fantasy. And then there was plenty of wide receiver depth later, and I think that's the thing you understand. Calvin Ridley was on that same team I drafted. You're able to find these guys and target them and realize that the supply and demand of wide receivers is always going to be a little bit more. It doesn't mean 0 wide receiver. It doesn't mean – I hate that. It's like lazy drafting. I just talked about this on the podcast actually right before this show. 0 anything is lazy. That's not a strategy. That's like I'm just not smart enough to come up with a strategy. No, you have a strategy and a plan and say, okay, there's a lot of value to be had in this wide receiver 2 tier. So instead of reaching necessarily, let me get my running backs. Let me lock that in, and then let me go and attack, the high volume guys or the high upside guys at wide receiver. And it can even play matchups at wide receiver, like in a DFS kind of scenario, and just bring that over to your season long. And the 2 things you always need to be in drafts are prepared and flexible. Because every time you think I'm going to do this in this round and this and that all goes out the window once you start drafting. You can have ideas and concepts, but then you have to be able to maneuver, and you have to be looking at how to build roster core strength It's not about filling out roster spots. It's about building core strength, and that's what I try to teach people in the Black Book.
Hey, I have to tell you, I think you just got EJ all excited because he loves Kareem Hunt, Fournette,
you and me
Matt
both,
Ryan,
baby.
Dak Prescott. Man,
You
those
and me
are
both,
his
EJ.
guys. So EJ loves that team right there. I guarantee you that, right? E?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man.
I mean, you're all over that team. So let's cut it down. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. Let's get into some RB ADP. I'm gonna start it off. I'm gonna start a love-hate kind of scene right here. I'm gonna start off with a guy I love, and it's David Montgomery. And you can get him in the late 5th, early 6th round, and I think he has some really big potential. We know he had so many weighted opportunities at the end of last year and during the season that just it didn't turn out well. It was kind of ugly, but I think that offense is going to look better in Chicago. I think Nick Foles is the man, and I'm not calling Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles. He doesn't have to do that. That's a top 5 defense still. I think they can use David Montgomery as that power horse. Allen Robinson on the outside is the guy. He's the number 1 guy. Am I wrong here? I think that's way low on him.
Well, you're definitely right about in terms of scoring opportunity. He had a lot more of that than he had conversions. And part of that is on the quarterback play. I am not nearly as high on Nick Foles as some other people are. The body of work of Nick Foles outside of that one little run that happened to get him to a Super Bowl is pretty mediocre at best. But I will say this, that Montgomery, to me, at the ADP you're getting him, is worth a shot, especially if you can get him as your 3rd running back potentially, because as your flex guy, he's got the touchdown upside. And he is just a second-year player. He also came into camp a little lighter, so that's important too. But the other thing to keep in mind with Montgomery is just like Melvin Gordon, people thought he was an abject failure his rookie year too. And what happened his second year? All of a sudden, things really click for him. Now, Phillip Rivers is way better than anything that he's got to work with clearly in Chicago. But at the same time, it's too early to give up on Montgomery, I think. And I think there's enough people who were disappointed last year where that value's been suppressed, where it becomes an interesting buy. So I am with you on Montgomery as an interesting buy.
EJ, your thoughts on Monty?
Man, I absolutely love him. I mean, those money rounds, 3rd, 4th, 5th, there's so much ceiling there, and that's all I care about is ceiling, okay? I don't draft scared. Your guys like your Melvin Gordon, okay? He didn't go to camp last year. He had a late start. Melvin Gordon in round 3 of the Denver Broncos, money. James Conner behind that offensive line in Pittsburgh. Go ahead and fade him all day because guess what? I can't predict his injuries, and if James Conner stays healthy in Pittsburgh, you're talking about a run-first football team who a running back who has great vision and knows the system. There's so much money. I know a guy that me really debate on, Xander, and that's even David Johnson. I get it. He hasn't been relevant since 2016, but neither has Odell Beckham, and everybody still loves him. David Johnson, one thing he's going to get is a lot of volume. You know why? Because they gave up way too much for him, and that coach obviously likes him, and he's still got good hands. I mean, that's a PPR guy that you're getting in the 4th round. Todd Gurley, same situation. Those are money rounds for running backs. So if you do go with that quarterback in the 1st round, or maybe go back-to-back if you're in that top 4 and you can grab a Mahomes and a Dak Prescott 1-2, you could still get 2 really good running backs that could top 10 ceiling at 3-4, and then there's still good receivers after that.
Joe, I'm gonna put you in a weird spot, my man. You're gonna have to settle a debate here.
All right.
Which side of the fence are you on, David Johnson? Because we know what EJ thinks now, and I'm the complete opposite. This man looked like he was in slow-mo last year. And yes, Carlos Hyde. I'm so sick of hearing about Carlos Hyde having his little 1,000-yard season. And yeah, he was adequate in fantasy. And you know what? Carlos Hyde had better tape last year than David Johnson. That's a fact. Now, was he 100% healthy? I don't know. I don't think David Johnson might ever be 100% healthy ever again. He's not morphing back into 2016. He is a humongous fade, especially at his ADP. We have him going in the late 3rd, early 4th. Like EJ said, he thinks it's value. I think I'm passing every single time. Joe, which side are you on?
I have to say the back did not look good last year. You saw a guy that looked like he couldn't move on the field at times, and that's something that scares the hell out of me. I also wonder how many times we're going to chase one good season with guys like him, guys like Josh Gordon. And look, it's not the talent. At a certain point in time, you have to be realistic of what's the upside here. And EJ's not wrong about what Houston likes to do, because they do like to pound the rock early and often. That's something that's very good. That's what made Lamar Miller a useful RB2. It's what made Carlos Hyde startable last year. However, you need a guy who's durable enough to do that, and I have severe questions whether or not DJ is that guy. I think they got fleeced in that trade. DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best talents out there, but I think that my take is anybody at the right price. I'm like the $1 million man when it comes to football, all right? Everybody's got a price, and at the right one, I'm willing to investigate one of these guys. But at the current price where David Johnson is, I just don't see that being nearly the return because, again, look at the number of games missed as opposed to the games played. And then when he's on the field, I understand it's tempting. I understand, you could go back in that 2016 season and just be blown away by how good a guy can be. But at the same time, it doesn't wash away all the missed games. It doesn't wash away the games that he played last year where he looked like he physically couldn't run the football. And I just don't know how long he can hold up under those circumstances. And as an RB2, I want that to be a guy that I can count on also. I will take a shot on Gurley. That's a better risk, in my opinion, way more than David Johnson. I'll take a shot on Chris Carson. And these are all guys that have issues too. But I think the amount of issues David Johnson has compared to the upside right now, when you look at the track record, I just think DJ's is a little bit too much risk, not enough reward.
Yeah.
Sorry, EJ. I love you anyway, baby.
But I love that you said Gurley because I believe a lot more in Gurley, even though he has some risk in there also. But I think he could be in a wheelchair in that offense and still score 10 touchdowns. That offense is going to be moving up and down fields. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. We all know the players, Hayden Hurst. The whole fucking first-round pick. Every player on the team is a first-round pick in the starting offense. So it's going to be crazy. And I don't know if Gurley is the Gurley from yesteryear, but I think a mediocre Gurley can score 10 touchdowns. And I think it's actually kind of safe. It's just how much is he going to be on the field? You mentioned a guy in Chris Carson that I'm fading. I'm pretty scared of that Seattle situation. I'm pretty scared of his injury history. And I mean, EJ knows this because we talked about it a ton last year. He has some fumbling issues.
Yeah.
So there's some news that possibly they're going to actually let Russell Wilson, run the offense in the first quarter instead of waiting to the third quarter to actually try to do something like, hey, hand it off, and then get a 3rd and 4 where you probably have to scramble. Let's have this guy do it from week 1, quarter 1, and let's see what he can do. But Chris Carson, I don't trust his health. You're going to have to sell me on him, Joe.
Oh, no, I'm not a Chris Carson guy either. It's more just the point of if I'm going to take a risk, I'll take the guy that last year was out there doing it every week. And Chris Carson was, despite some of the fumble issues and what was going on there with him. But in terms of RB2s, like I'm looking at guys like Leonard Fournette, who I don't love, but another guy that in a contract year with the amount of volume, the fact that they're going to burn him and turn him probably. I mean, I don't see anybody fighting him for carries over there. Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones is like floating all the way down there to that RB2 low-end RB1 conversation. Those all guys are much safer than Carson and even Gurley to a certain extent. Josh Jacobs is another guy too. I think he's a phenomenal talent and phenomenal work ethic too. I actually got to meet him 2 years ago, and the guy's just off the charts when it comes to makeup. And I think he's going to be just you're only scratching the surface of how good that kid's going to be. So as crazy as it sounds, like I'd even rather have Le'Veon Bell than I would Chris Carson because Le'Veon Bell, I have an idea what he is in the offense. And despite Adam Gase's shortcomings, and there are many, many, many shortcomings for Adam Gase, Bell is by far the best weapon on this offense. And if you're going to develop a young quarterback, you have to continue to utilize that. Last year was such a wash for that whole team. Bell could even lead this team in receptions. It's possible when all said and done. It's probably unlikely, but it's possible. And I'm not worried too much about Frank Gore at this stage in his career, killing the value of Le'Veon Bell. But again, it's everybody in their place. Chris Carson has risk without a doubt, but there's other guys in that RB2 conversation that I think you should be looking at ahead of Carson and ahead of David Johnson too.
EJ, what you think of Chris Carson and then go on into New York with the Le'Veon Bell situation because what we think about the Jets here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any shares of Chris Carson. I mean, I've done a lot of redrafts. I've done a lot of mocks. He's just on my fade list. They brought Carlos Hyde in over there, correct? I just don't trust it. But you know what? Joe's right. Whoever is the running back and is going to get the volume, he's going to do pretty well. Leonard Fournette, that's the guy too as well I'm fading. I don't have too many Fournette shares. I mean, it is that contract year, but that offense does not impress me. I'm not even comfortable watching it like any fantasy players on there, even the Sharks. And, if you look at Fournette, man, only 23 of 76 catches went for first downs. But again, on the other side, he still is a workhorse, and there's only a few people not in a running back by committee. But if you got a Fournette, that's because if I get Fournette, he fell to me that much, and I'm hoping for a trade. Le'Veon Bell, absolutely not. I'm fading Le'Veon Bell. No interest whatsoever. I'm actually hoping that LaMichael P. Ryan gets a chance. I don't want Adam Gase, nothing to do with any of his offense, especially running backs.
It's really funny that Leonard Fournette's coming off his best season. And he's on almost everybody's fade list because I think there's so much uncertainty with is he going to be traded? I think he's the best candidate out there.
I hope he does get traded.
Right.
Like, I'd love to see him get traded.
Could
That'd
you
be fantastic.
imagine, like, maybe Gurley doesn't work out and Atlanta maybe throws a third-round pick to come get Leonard Fournette? And I think that would be insane. But he's coming off his best season, 76 receptions. Who thought he had that in him?
I certainly didn't.
No way I did. I mean, this guy averaged 100 yards per game, total yards, and just so few touchdowns. So he doesn't have the weighted touches like EJ said. But if he has that much volume, I can dig it. And I can dig him as a low-end RB1. I really can, even in that offense.
Look, he's also one of the best guys in yards after contact last year, too. So you have to keep that in mind. And nobody got hit in the backfield more than him either. And he still had the season he had, which is kind of stunning when you think about it. So when you put all those factors in there and you realize the big knock on him is touchdowns, well, touchdowns can be arbitrary sometimes. You know, you can have touchdowns that he scored get called back for whatever reason or a penalty and things of that nature. So, you know, Gardner Minshew is not the greatest quarterback in the world, okay? But I think he's serviceable enough that Leonard Fournette's value as an RB2, look, his upside is far greater than some of the other guys in that same conversation. I'm sorry. And I am not a Fournette guy historically. I'm the guy always telling you, oh, you can't take him as your one. He's always injury prone. Getting hurt in college. He's getting hurt all the time. You know what? Now he's a 2. My tune has changed. So big difference there.
That's funny right there. And he's a guy with all the talent in the world. And if he could be traded, oh my God, are you kidding me? If he lands in a sweet spot, we could actually see the Leonard Fournette that we thought we had coming out of LSU. So going on down the list, here's my favorite guy. You mentioned him earlier, and I got so giddy. It was like giggity. Cam Akers, currently the 26th RB coming off the board in PPR leagues. 67 overall. That's in the middle of the 6th round. I think that's going to go up. There was an injury with Darrell Henderson this week. I think this guy has all the upside in the world, and he is the X factor that every fantasy owner wants on their team. Yeah, he might not be able to startable in September, but by October, November, December, this guy could be averaging 100 total. Sean McVay, we know the history. They want to run downhill. Jared Goff isn't that guy. He can't just sit back there and pick apart defense. He needs a run game. He needs a play action pass, and he needs to be in rhythm because he can't move worth a damn. Once he gets off his spot, he can't throw. So Cam Akers, this guy's more powerful than people think. And I think he was on a really bad Florida State team, and I think he has as much upside as anybody not named Clyde Edwards-Helaire from this rookie class. What do you think about Cam Akers? And am I getting excited for no reason, Joe?
No, you're excited for every reason, and I think there's a good chance he is the starter in September, especially with this Henderson injury potentially. So Henderson really hasn't done it for me. Akers, I think, has all the opportunity, and he's a better ROI than Jonathan Taylor right now because Taylor does still have Mack there. And I get it. Everybody thinks Taylor's the better back, and that's fine. But Mack is on the last year of his contract, and Mack is coming off 2 years where he had almost 1,000 yards back-to-back seasons. So I just want to slow everybody's roll a little bit and be realistic about Taylor. It's not that I don't like him. It's just you're pushing him to a point where he has to return value as opposed to a guy like Cam Akers, who if he does return value, he becomes a big difference maker. And then they got DeAndre Swift, who's just kind of sitting there too. And his value hasn't really moved. He's kind of stayed flat, and I like that. I like that it stayed flat in one spot because that's another guy that I'm happy to draft and wait and see what happens, but I think Akers is going to get an opportunity before a lot of some other rookies, basically, in some other backfields.
EJ, what you think? I know you're not as high on Cam as me, but what do you think about Swift, Akers, and Jonathan Taylor?
I absolutely agree with Joe. I think, Jonathan Taylor's going to have some monster weeks, but guess what? So is Marlon Mack. It's going to be like running back roulette over there. Every week is going to be this, going to be back and forth, and that's frustrating. That's very frustrating when, you got two good running backs in the same backfield in a fantasy aspect, when you're getting a 3-point performance one week and a 24 the next. I do see that because Marlon Mack can ball, man. You give that kid some volume, he can run the football. There's no doubt about that. Like you said, Joe, everybody's writing him off, but why? The kid can definitely play football. Cam Akers, if he gets the opportunity, I mean, it's McVay. What's he going to do? He's going to make him shine. I like Cam Akers. And in certain leagues, I mean, if you're drafting online, I mean, I know the sleeper format. I don't know if anybody draft on sleeper, but they got him way down the list, and you could just literally steal him the 5th, 6th because people don't even see him, you know. But, yeah, Cam Akers is – I mean, I like Malcolm Brown a little bit too. He knows the system. They kept him around. I don't like him for fantasy, but I do think that no matter what happens, I think McVay's going to give everybody a little bit of a role there. As far as DeAndre Swift, that's the same situation I just talked about Indy. Guess what? Kerryon Johnson is good at football as well. It's going to be a 50-50, man. You're going to have one guy have a good week, the next guy have a good week. It's a high-hand approach.
Now, I love Swift. Swift was my RB1 coming into the year, or coming into the draft, excuse me. He was the RB1 coming out of college. The guy is dynamic, but he ended up in a shithole in Detroit. But we've seen what Theo Riddick tried to do with 80 receptions. What if DeAndre Swift got that type of PPR reception value and actually do something with it? That is pretty – I mean, that's scary for fantasy owners. Like, this guy could be an Alvin Kamara type.
Well, look, Georgia running backs have done very well in the NFL in the last 6-7 years. So I think we should all look at that and realize that transition has been excellent in that running back pipeline.
One thing I want to ask you, sorry, in Georgia, I mean, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, we all know that history. Why is Kyle Shanahan is kind of the darling of the NFL right now? And last year it was McVay. So many people are down on McVay, and it's one of the things why the reason I love Cam Akers. What's going on with that? Why is so many people down on McVay?
You know, they're down on McVay because I think, you know, look, the Rams have a lot of issues. They have a lot of cap issues. They also have issues with expectation and falling short of them. And I think Sean McVay is a very bright football mind, but I think he outthought himself a little bit last year. You could see it sometimes in the field. You know, back in the day when they would just turn the ball and make sure, you know, Todd Gurley was getting touches and Todd Gurley would be Todd Gurley. That was the key to their success. And they got away from that. For whatever reason that might be, they got away from it, and I think they paid for it. Now they have to figure out a way to get back to it because, like you said, Jared Goff is not the kind of guy who's going to just be glorious on his own. He needs help. But going back to Swift, man, that's a guy for me that, once again, Kerryon is a guy I don't trust. He is very inconsistent. He was inconsistent in college too. But I do think eventually Swift, as the season goes on, is going to be one of those guys, better trade target, maybe even than a draft target, because he should start off slow. But there's certainly upside in the second half for a guy to really start coming up. And look, you have to look at these situations differently now too with COVID, because if a guy tests positive for something, all of a sudden he's out for a couple weeks. A guy who was the second banana running back can become the first one for a couple weeks. So it's going to be crazy out there. So it might be smart to add another spot to your benches or do another 2 rounds of a draft or add another, you know, injury spot, because you're going to need more flexibility this year and more depth for sure.
This is going to be the biggest year for the waiver wire. I mean, the most important factor of 2020 NFL season is going to be the waiver wire in fantasy. Am I right, EJ? You're going to have to be on it this year.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm on it every year, but all I do is win. My team always looks different at the end of the year from the beginning.
That's why he's the big shot.
Let me bring up something to you, Z, though. When you are talking about them rookies, people are fading guys like Mark Ingram. You know, hey, what do you say? Big trust. You know, Mark Ingram is going to eat, man, contract year. We're talking that same tier of people. Kareem Hunt, you just brought up. I mean, these are guys that are money there. I mean, Raheem Mostert, what they do? They added Big Trent. You know they're going to run the ball. The kid's a freak athlete. I mean, you know, there's a lot of options there. Even a Matt Breida is right there, maybe under. I mean, who knows what he's going to do in Miami. You know, as far as when it comes to running backs and J.K. Dobbins as well, I mean, when you're talking about those rounds, I'm going with the Mark Ingrams and the guys I know that are going to ball out over, you know, throwing a dart at the DeAndre Swift and the Jonathan Taylor. That's me personally.
I don't disagree with that. I think, you know, every year everyone wants to get rid of Mark Ingram, and I'm sorry. Like, you know, when you watch the games and you see how important he is with Lamar Jackson, he's like a second coach on the field and on the sidelines with him. It's been very important to his success has been a lot tied into Mark Ingram and the two of them together in that backfield and him helping him out there. So, yeah, sometimes, and this happens, you know, guys you take for granted often become values. And Kareem Hunt's one of these guys too. There's very few guys you could draft as a flex running back that if the guy in front of them gets hurt, all of a sudden he becomes a top 5 potential running back. And that's how good Kareem Hunt is. So that could be staggering. And not to mention him and Chubb last year, once he came back and they were both in that offense, they were basically just 1 point per game separation in terms of fantasy points. So that's not a lot. So there's plenty for both these guys to be very good, and there's plenty in terms of return on investment. Kareem Hunt is an outstanding one in my opinion.
What do you think about Mostert? Are you a big fan of that?
You know what? My problem with Mostert, it's a great question, is he's been on 5 teams in the last 3 years. And for 5 different organizations to be wrong on a guy, that gives me pause. I'm not saying he can't be good. He was a great run. I respect what he did. I like the guy a lot. It's a good offense, but I'm not going to have heavy draft capital in him. Again, as a flex RB, okay. As my RB2, I'm a little worried about it.
Okay.
I feel the same exact way, but I think he has some maybe fantasy superstar potential in 2020. We've seen what he did against Green Bay. They're still having nightmares of this guy. The offensive line lost possibly one of their best tackles in the last 20 years, and they actually improved the position. Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle. I mean, every single wide receiver seems to be getting hurt left and freaking right.
Well, don't forget about C.J. Anderson, though. I mean, there's guys like that pop, every couple of years, and it looks like it's going to be gold, and then it doesn't. And that's, there are these guys that come out of nowhere and then fade just as quickly sometimes.
I 100% agree on that. I have him like RB25. So I'm right there on that RB2 and that flex consideration. Now, Joe, we're running out of time here. Any last thoughts real quick? We have about 45 seconds, man. Look, it's been fun.
All my thoughts are in the black book. You go pick it up there on Amazon. I appreciate the time, guys. And like I said, we try to be that one book for all your leagues. Best ball, PPR, Superflex, doesn't matter. We've got a draft strategy chapter. We got RPV, relative position value, and I have a great group of contributors there. And I just appreciate it. I love talking football with you guys, so I appreciate the time and you having me on, man.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks a lot, man. It's been fun, and we'll have to do it again soon for sure.
You got it, boys.
Always a pleasure, Joe. Thanks, bud.